Members, is there any objection to considering the budget early? Hearing none. Chair lays out the following resolution. The Secretary will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 899 by Nelson, suspending limitations on Conference Committee jurisdiction on Senate Bill 1.
Senator Nelson, you are recognized to explain the resolution.
You want me to explain the resolution, or you want me to lay out the Conference Committee report?
You're first recognized for a motion on the resolution.
I so move.
Any objection? Secretary will call the roll.
Bettencourt, Vogel.
31 ayes and no nays. The resolution is adopted. Now the chair lays out the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 1.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members. The Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 1 establishes our funding priorities for the next 2 years. It is a responsible budget. It meets our essential needs. It continues the policies of fiscal restraint that have shaped our success, and it positions us for the future. Before I get into specifics, I want to remind everyone how we got here. Last session, we had more revenue, Senator Whitmire, than we could spend under the spending limit. We made several key investments. We sent money back to the taxpayers, and we set funds aside in our reserves, which turned out to be a very wise decision. Our economy continued to grow and prosper, but the price of oil fell, causing major downward changes to our revenue outlook. We saw what was coming, and we took several steps to prepare for a tough budget cycle. Long before we convened, we asked our state agencies to identify 4% savings as part of their appropriation request. We put 16 agencies under our version of zero-based budgeting, and the governor directed a hiring freeze. In January, the comptroller confirmed what we already knew. I filed a starting point budget, and you all heard me say many times, this is a starting point. The Senate Finance Committee went to work, and I have to, before I say anything else, thank every member of our Senate's Finance Committee. I have never seen a group of individuals work so hard. And thank you to all of you. We formed work groups right off the bat to study school finance, healthcare costs, and our juvenile justice needs. We divided the budget articles into work groups. We scrubbed and we scrubbed. We looked for every possible savings with the goal of freeing up additional resources for our priorities. This is the first budget cycle involving Proposition 7. Senator Nichols, we joint authored it because transportation is critical to all of our districts. We fully funded the effort to find a long-term funding source, but in a tight revenue situation, it impacts our ability to meet other needs. The Senate budget reflects our intent that the net sales tax collected over the next 2 years be directed to TxDOT as quickly as possible in keeping with Proposition 7. But the Constitution is very clear that net means net. It's not an estimate. It's the dedication of net annual sales tax collection at the end of each year. In consultation with the comptroller, we made the assumption that this would happen in September each year, meaning the second transfer would occur in the next biennium. The Attorney General agreed. However, this was a lively discussion point with the House. It was a tough conference. And let me say that my counterpart over in the House, Chairman Zerwas, I couldn't have asked for a better partner. And I'm very, very grateful that we had an opportunity to work together in the past, and we shared so many similar goals, and we worked hard to figure out how to get there. Our House and Senate conferees worked long hours. It became clear right away that we had very similar goals on what to fund, but very different ideas about how we would pay for that. In the end, we agreed that $1.8 billion in Proposition 7 funds will transfer in the next biennium. And we would take $990 million from the Economic Stabilization Fund to pay for one-time expenses. From the beginning, the Senate has been very clear that we would only use those funds for one-time expenditures, and we held true to that principle. In this budget, ESF funds are limited to life and safety repairs, necessary construction needs, and grants to local entities. Even with these methods of finance, this budget is fiscally responsible. It essentially is flat compared with the current one, but it makes progress in several key areas. Now, I'm a former teacher, and y'all know I'm a grandmother, and education is very important to me, as it is every member of this body. I don't think anything is as important to our future, and this budget in education continues formula funding at current levels with a basic allotment of $5,140 per student. It adds $2.65 billion of enrollment growth for over 80,000 students per year. Higher education is important to ensuring that we have a well-trained workforce. We provided an overall increase to higher education. We also increased Texas grants for tuition assistance. We provided an additional $44 million for graduate medical education. We increased community college formula funding by $23 million. We funded the universities at least 90% of their fiscal year 16-17 appropriations. We made the decision early on that we were going to prioritize funds that were directly related to educating students, which is why we took a very close look at those special items. Those special items were supposed to be temporary. Many of them have remained in the budget year after year. The Senate's goal was to apply a uniform approach to reining those in, but the task, I have to tell you, proved more complicated than we could manage in 140 days. That's why we are requesting in this budget a joint interim committee that will keep working on this. We also agreed to sunset all non-formula support in August of 2019 because 8 years is enough for startup funds and formula generating items at universities, which is why these special items were cut in half in this budget. Additionally, this legislature was united behind the goal of protecting abused and neglected children and fixing the problems at Child Protective Services. This budget includes funding for CPS, increases funding for CPS by over $500 million, including 600 new caseworkers, and that is above the emergency resources that we approved over the interim. This budget also makes significant progress in mental health. This budget projects to spend $7.6 billion on mental health services across all state agencies, an $800 million increase over projected spending this biennium on mental health. This budget also includes funding to preserve and provide updates to the Alamo. We provided $40 million to support infrastructure projects at Texas ports, $800 million for border security, $4.2 million to eliminate the current rape kit backlog. That doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it's important money, and we eliminated that rape kit backlog. $25 million to provide our law enforcement with protective, high-caliber vests. I could go on, and we're going to hear from each of our individual work group leaders with some more specifics, but members, This was not an easy budget to balance. We are a growing state with growing needs. But we're Texas, and we outpace everyone, and that's why we remain the economic envy of this nation. This budget is smart. This budget is compassionate. It makes huge advances in several of our priority areas. It is fiscally responsible, and it keeps Texas on a path to a successful future.